I'm Mahin, and this is your Bellydance Quickie. Today we're going to talk about neutral pelvis. Now that is something that was the subject of last Saturday's DBQ. If you are an email subscriber, then you saw the article that I shared. It was a really great article about neutral pelvis and dance in general, and about some of its strengths and weaknesses as far as the position. So in our basic belly dance posture, we do use neutral pelvis, but we need to use it selectively, and we need to use it carefully and deliberately so that it doesn't just become a dogmatic idea, which I think that is something that happens. Sometimes teachers get a hold of this idea of neutral pelvis and they think it has to be all the time and it's a constant, and it's not, but it is a home base for us. So what is neutral pelvis first off? How will we get there? When do we use it, and when shouldn't we be using it? So just a couple things for today. First off, neutral pelvis defined anatomically is when you find the bump on the front of your hip, which is your anterior superior iliac spine, which is a little bump in front of the crest of your hip, and then your pubic bone down here. And when these 3 points, these bony points, are stacked up on top of each other vertically, that is a neutral pelvis position. So how do we get to that position? Well, there's a couple ways to tilt your pelvis. One is, of course, by squeezing your glutes and pushing your pelvis forward like this. That's not how we want to do this for belly dance, because squeezing your glutes here, not only does this lock up a very large chunk of powerful muscle, because if it's all, that muscle there is all tight and contracted, that it really reduces all of the nice fluid and soft things we can do with our hips while we do want our pelvis in a neutral position. So what we use is our lower abdominal muscles. We can use our psoas muscle, which is very deep and runs from the lower part of the spine down here and down diagonally like this, and then onto the inside of the upper thigh. And that, along with your transverse abdominis and the low, very low part of your core muscle group right down here, and some of your obliques as well, they all work together. But by using the abdominal muscles, the lower abdominal muscles, to hold the pelvis in this neutral position, we'll get much softer control of it. So that's how we get there, and how we don't get there. So let's talk about some positions where our pelvis stays and doesn't stay in neutral, just as some examples. Well, when you take your pelvis in neutral, what you're doing is you're tilting it this way. So basically you're rolling, if you have a dial in your hips, you're kind of rotating it this way. So you're working on this sagittal plane of the body that goes forward and back through the body. So when we take our hips in a tuck and a drop position like this is that same motion. And what's going on right here is when you're releasing and activating those muscles to pick the pelvis up and to release it down. And this affects the curve in your spine. So when we do anything like a tuck and drop, or if we do something like a camel, our pelvis does pass through neutral, and then it has to release, and it's not a neutral anymore. So it comes forward, it comes in an extreme tucked position, so the extreme posterior tilt comes through neutral, and then it releases into an anterior tilt like this. So here's a time when we want to let our pelvis come out of a neutral position. And there are many other times, but that's probably the most obvious. So when we do want our pelvis in a neutral position, one of the reasons why, aside from helping to keep our posture activated, because when we pull up like this activates the core muscles, and it helps remind us to stabilize and lift, and it's just a good general alignment that kind of travels up the body energetically. Also, it protects the low back. So that's another important feature of this position, and that's why we want it sometimes. Now, one of the reasons is that it helps keep our movement in the plane that we want it in. So, for example, one of the examples I like to give in class anyway is when we talk about a hip up position. So here, we're just talking about hip straight up, like this, lifting from up here. Okay? These muscles are lifting from here. If we do this in a neutral pelvis position, our hip up is going to be nice and clean and up, almost like it's up into the armpit. But if we let our pelvis fall out of neutral while we do this, and then we lift up, we get something that looks more like this. And you'll feel like a squeezing in your low back muscles down here on the side that's lifting. That's very uncomfortable for some people, and also if you do it habitually, can cause some tightness back there, no problem. And it also doesn't give us the angle that we want, because sometimes we do want this up angle like this, but if we want this, we have to keep the pelvis neutral. So There are some ideas on that topic that were from the article last week and its application to Bellydance. So now that you know how we arrive at neutral pelvis, which muscles we do use, which muscles we don't want to use to get in there, and also some examples. So perhaps we'll do some more with this in the future. If you guys are interested, let me know. Go ahead and leave a comment in the box down there and give the video a thumbs up if you like it. And have a wonderful week. Bye!